Welcome. Today, I'm joined by Korte. We work together at SAP, really building value around the healthcare industry. But Dawn brings a wealth of knowledge beyond that. She's an author. She comes from the healthcare industry. She's passionate about career growth for executives as well as early talent, and thrilled to learn from her expertise today.
Thank you for having me. So
So,
good to
Dawn,
see you, Katie.
thank you. As we get started, I would love if we could kick off with just a little bit of an intro about your background, your expertise, and what are some of the things that you've really found great across your career.
Well, I've done great. I don't know about great, but I've been fortunate. So I was one of those ladies that never really knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I just kind of found myself in a lot of places. And I know one of the things that you wanted me to talk about was how do you parlay your skills? I think I've been able to do that in my career quite successfully. I started out, I was going to go to law school. I was going to be a lawyer. And then my mother said, and then you met that boy. And I'm like, okay, well, I later divorced that boy, but I guess that doesn't count anyway. But I spent my career basically trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And when I settled down into that feeling, it really got good. So for me, I describe myself as having a financial and operational and an HR and OD background. I certainly have an MBA with an emphasis in healthcare finance, but I also taught part time at an adjunct level for 25, almost 30 years. So I love that piece of my career too. So I'm kind of a hodgepodge of it all. I mean, my undergrad is of course pre-law, my graduate is finance, and then of course I've finished my PhD in leadership development, which is where I found my true home, and my true passion. So to say that I'm here in front of you as some wildly skilled thing is just an anomaly because that's not what it is. I got lucky and I worked really hard and I met great people like yourself that really gave me a lot of wisdom along the way. So little bit of luck, a lot of hard work.
I love it. And I think, while it's been different experiences, there's always something that we learn from one experience that would transition into the next. Can you talk a little bit about some of your career transitions? What are maybe some of the things you learned in one area that helped you parlay that into the next path?
Sure, sure. I get that question a lot actually, because what I spend my time now doing, and I spent 10 great years, almost 10 years at SAP, great organization, loved tech, but I was in healthcare. I was running basically a health system, and I knew I wanted to do something different. And I knew I wanted to be at a global company, and I knew I wanted to be uncomfortable. And all those things came to bear when I went and hired a coach. And that's what I do now is basically coach. And I get that question a lot. And how do I start? How do I do it? For me, that move was intentional, but some of my other moves along the way weren't. And I think that if I can leave you with anything today, I want to leave you with the fact that when I talk about presence, and again, we used to say executive presence, it's anybody's presence, right? I don't care who you are. I don't care what they call you. It's what you do with what they call you, right? That's what the meaning in the punch is. And so for me, when I think about what I want to leave you with today, I want to leave you with the fact that presence is about being prepared. It's
Mm.
about being present in the moment, being prepared, and being purposeful with what you do. Presence isn't about swagger. Presence isn't about having the upper hand. It can be a lot of those things, but it's not. And so those are the three things I want to leave you with because that's how I changed my career. I was present, I was prepared, and I acted in a very purposeful manner. So for the time that I did decide I want to leave this healthcare company that I'm at, and I was very happy. And in fact, 2 more years, I could have had enough in to retire on a nice glide path. And I remember the CEO saying to me, what are you doing? And I was like, I want to go do something different. I know I can do this and I want to be uncomfortable. And that was probably the hardest thing. And I'm going to talk about that today. Yeah, do a skills inventory. Obviously, your hard skills, right? What are those technical skills that you have that you can go into another industry with? When I asked myself that question in the healthcare arena, I was like, what can I take to tech? I can take a lot into tech, right? I may be the girl that can't work my phone, but I can certainly bring skills like financial analysis and things like that that I knew I would be comfortable with already. So
Mhm.
for me, that was the first thing was doing the skills inventory, but also the soft skills because that's where you really make the crossover, right? And so when I left healthcare, I was coming into this tech world scared to death. And I will tell you this much, that first 6 months, it was rough. It was probably the hardest scalpel, the sharpest scalpel I think I've ever had in my hand career wise, because I was constantly learning. But boy, It was great. And I learned so much. And that's when you really grow, is when you open yourself up to say, I'm okay to be scared,
Mhm.
right? I'm all right with that. And that's what it's going to take to go from this world into that world. Then I'm going to do it. And I'll just
Mhm.
have to get used with being afraid.
Yeah.
So that's one of the steps.
So, let's talk a little bit, since you brought up around how you did that skills inventory. You kind of felt this uncomfortable voice of, I could just coast. I got 2 years until I can retire, but I want to do something different.
Right.
How did you listen to that voice, embrace uncomfortability, and really do the skills inventory to find out what does that change look like for you?
Well, okay. She's probably going, Katie knows me well enough. And she's like, don't cuss on the podcast, Dawn. It was scary as hell, Katie. I mean, it was scary, right? Because you sit here and you go, okay, here's my hard skills. Here's my domain specific things that I can do. Here's this. And then here's all this stuff that I have: influence, persuasion, leadership ability, all that kind of stuff. But it comes down to mapping your network capital, right? That's the next step you have to do. And you really have to take advice from those people that you may not want to take advice from, those advisors, those mentors, those people that have been out there in your career saying, maybe you should try this, right? So it's a moment of awareness in my mind that needs to happen. And I talk to my people I coach about it too. It's kind of like when you get to that crossroads of should and must, and that's a great book. Okay.
Mhm.
It's like, here's what I'm really good at, but here's what I really love. And if you find the thing that you really love, you run to work anyway, right? You're not running from it, you're running to it. And I can tell you that in my experience, everybody will say there's certain things they love about their job and certain things they can't stand. But when you go to map your network capital, those things start to bubble up. And they can be a problem if you're trying to parlay your skills into a new industry, a new area. So when we talk about mapping capital, what we really mean is like, who do I know? Are there associations that I'm involved in this industry? Okay. Who do I know over here? I came to SAP as a healthcare expert, right? So that was already built for me. But that's what we mean by how do you map your capital? You start to figure out on this map, okay, I don't have this tech kind of ability, but I've got a friend over here that's got it and they can maybe help me with that. So as you start to parlay into another industry, that's when you start to look at these things to go, okay, I know I'm good at this and I'm not so good at that, but now I need help in how and where that takes me, right? And so you start to map your capital and you start to depend on your network. But the
Mhm.
real trick comes in my opinion, is when you, because I didn't do this when I went into tech. It's a little thing that we call, well, I definitely positioned and branded, but I didn't always do those bridge building strategies. And I spend a lot of time coaching people with that because the people that I get these days are the ones that don't have anything to prove, right? And they just want to do something different, but they're terrified of leaving the world that they've known, right?
Mhm.
So when we talk about building bridge strategies, what I mean is gaining credibility in that new field. All right. What are you writing about in healthcare, Dawn? Now that you're at SAP and a big tech company, what are you writing that is going to appeal to those folks about healthcare? Not about your, infection control friends back at the ranch, right? I'm talking about something different. And that's how we start to build those bridges. We get involved. We start posting things on our social media. We read more. We start to become experts in that field that we want to be in. And then we just shift our message a little bit to a different audience.
Mhm.
So those are some of the ways that I did it.
Yeah, I love it. How about specifically you went from a healthcare practitioner, having been an adjunct professor, into tech, but not just tech, you're an industry advisor, but also the sales side of it. Really focusing on how are we building value. But can you talk a little bit about kind of some of the things you had to learn around sales or how some of your past skills maybe helped parlay into a sales experience? Because internally, regardless of what our job is, we do a lot of internal selling and that really helps us parlay it into external with our customers.
I think, and I won't quote the rep, but I know when I say this, you'll know who I'm talking about. A good friend of ours. I think the best lesson I got coming into sales was, Dawn, they have the tension span of a moth. And I thought to myself, that can't be right. It's very fast moving, is what that statement meant. And it really was. From where I came from, we planned and we planned and we worked that plan. Okay. Not how it goes in tech, right? Sometimes you have a great plan, and sometimes that plan can really just evaporate in a minute because somebody in the room said something. And it's usually not even intentional that happens, right? And then you see these deals just going to part in front of you. I mean, they're just evaporating, right? So for me, the big thing was really learning the business. And I even came out of it with a slogan. And I say this all the time. I say, boss the business, boss the
Both
business,
this.
boss your business, know your business, especially as, and again, I'm just going to say women in tech, right? That's why we're here. It's very difficult, right? It hasn't always been that great of a place for us. It hasn't. So that's what I tell ladies. Don't, because we can tend to get a bad rap. I mean, oh, they're strong-willed. Their executive presence is strong. Whatever they're going to say. That's why I say boss the business. Don't boss people, but know your business, because that's what saves you in those moments. And the sales team, you do have to know the business for them to appreciate you,
Hmm.
because you're trying to add value with what you're doing. But overall, at the end of the day, you have to be able to step back and see what's happening in that deal and why it is so important to people. Again, I started with, I want to leave you with a couple things: It- being present, being prepared, and being purposeful. You know, I always used to hear this at SAP and other tech companies too. Apple, it's like they want us to validate and validate what we're doing, validate our worth. Well, of course they do. Yeah. Yeah. And I want you to do that too. And you should want to do it. You should want to do it, because if you're purposeful, you're boss in the business, and you know what's going on in that deal, and you understand what brings everybody to that table, including your customer, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Hmm.
And where I came from, you think about customers in healthcare. Well, you're sick. Believe me, we've made a fortune on keeping you sick, right? So, I mean, healthcare's kind of built around a different model when you look at it from a customer perspective. So when I went into tech, for me, it was all about getting everybody's motivations on the table, around the table, on the table. So then I know what I'm dealing with and how to take this forward. Because what we did together at SAP, technology is just a piece of it.
Hmm.
You have to be able to talk to them at an organization about their people, about their processes, about their infrastructure. This is a piece of pie that's going to go into all of that, this technology. So it was very helpful for me to center and look at the purpose and what everybody was bringing around the table, and then say, okay, now how do we make this best for that customer that we're trying to serve? Because sales guys and women, they get caught up in their own goals, right? We do. We get caught up in it. Hey, I never got invited to club, but it sounded really fun and I wanted to go. But those are the things that you deal with. And then you have to know too the shiny objects in the room, right? Because when the dust settles and we've sold that software, they still have to make it work, and we're going to be the ones that get called. And that's a flattering thing when they do trust you that much to call you.
Hmm.
So for me, it was about appreciating what everybody brought to the party and then trying to manage that. But I won't lie to you and say it was easy, because I've never seen anything move so fast. And I mean, you're working all night on a deal and you think you're lockstep to go. And then you get a call at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then that changes the 9 o'clock conversation. So it's a fast paced environment, but what a pump. It
Yeah,
was fun.
absolutely. Absolutely. Just yesterday, I was talking with someone and they had a great insight. They reminded me, we don't sell technology, we solve problems for people. And I think that step back, which is similar to what you talked about, of let's really think about our motivation and why are we here and what are we doing? Technology is just a piece of that. The sales is a much bigger process of how are we solving problems, connecting motivation, and really
Yes.
understanding and building a relationship.
And they're vulnerable. Okay. I'm just going to use that word. I heard it a lot in healthcare. And those people really are vulnerable. They're knocked out half the time, right? They're sick. But if you think about the trust that they place in us in tech and what they want this to do, and what we talk to them about what it can do, that's vulnerability at its finest, right? They're trusting us. And so it's absolutely critical we get it right. It's critical.
Absolutely.
And you build that trust through the conversations, right? Because we know, you've heard it before, software doesn't sell itself. The trust sells the software. But what do they have to trust? They have to trust in us
Mhm.
as people, as executive, as individuals in the room. I mean, I've been even on a deal where they've asked, okay, who's that person in the room, right? And you're like, oh, that's our note taker. Okay. You can't do anything with that note taker, right? Somebody that's like going to get the stuff that we need afterwards, right? That's how come they're so concerned and they're vulnerable. And we have to appreciate that, even though we're in the middle of a sales cycle and we've got targets.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even vulnerability for us to step into uncomfortable situations that we don't know enough or, you know, to throw out a point of view and say, I know you're asking about this, but I think we should do this. And that can be hard for us because we want to come in with all the answers, but that can be a
You
great
do.
place to connect.
It is. It is. I mean, you asked me, we've talked about this a lot, sticky situations, right? We've talked about this. And you've said to me, and again, I'm, if they haven't already figured this out about me, I'm a person that knows exactly who I am. I mean, I am straight up shaken, not stirred. Okay. And when you know yourself, you know who's at the table with what, and then you know how to play off of that too. Exactly. But
Mhm.
it's the building of the trust. It's making sure that people around you feel solid. And that's what executive presence really is, right? It's all about confidence. It's all about decisions. It's all about communication. Those are the things that we know. And just the other day, it was 26% of people 26% of people said in a survey that executive presence is mandatory to get there. So over a fourth of them believe that you have to have this, whatever it is about you, right? And so knowing yourself is where you start with that. But it starts at the table too. Even though you're in this vicious cycle of a sale and you're trying to do everything, remember that customer is vulnerable.
Okay. So let's talk about executive presence because it's a term that's thrown around a lot, sometimes
It is.
overused.
It
I
is.
candidly, when I first heard it, I didn't know what it meant. I got sent to an executive presence training and I thought, this is going to teach me how to present to executives. I didn't know that it was about me and how I show up and how I define what my career is. So let's start off with what's your outlook of executive presence, how you define it. What is it? What isn't executive presence?
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you some statistics. I just pulled these up. Okay. So hang on to your hat here. All right. 67%. Now, this is a national survey. Okay. Normal people just like me and you. 67% say executive presence is gravitas.
Hmm.
67%. 28% is communication. The remainder is how you look. Okay. Well, let's break that down. I mean, you're like, okay. And the big thing these days is about brand, right? What does that say about you? Even your clothes. I started the Women's Leadership Council at SIU, and, we mentor current college students with seasoned executives from our college. And we just had a meeting, and the thing that we went through was dress for them. What do you want your clothes to say about you when you walk into a room? Are you really sure you want that one hotmama.com email out there or whatever you had in college when you were, having fun? No, is the answer, right? So when I think about executive presence, and I don't even want to call it executive presence, I just call it presence. Because to me, those leaders that you want to follow. But let's break it down. Okay. So 5% is polish and intentional style. Okay. Not hard. Where it gets hard is the 67% on gravitas because it's confidence. Okay. It's about decisions that you make. What does that mean? How do you build confidence? Well, it's composure under pressure too. It's sitting in the room and watching that deal implode and calmly being the voice of reason and saying to them, customer, we hear you, right? You don't want to say things like, we believe. What do you mean you believe? No, And those are the things that you pick up in executive class about what to say, right? What you want to say is, we see that and we're tracking it and we understand it is on the product enhancement list for 2026 fall. Those are the answers that you give, right? The
Hmm.
solid ones. But that's what they mean by gravitas. How do you hold yourself? Are you confident or are you fearful? Right? We talked a little bit about fear being a good balance, keeping your saw sharp because it does. But that's what they mean about gravitas. Even the speed with which you make decisions are measured, right? And then how you communicate, that's that second big piece. But think about it, almost 70% of your presence is confidence, composure, commanding a room, showing visual connection and conviction.
Hmm.
Do you believe what I'm saying to you? Right. So those are the things that talk about as you walk into a room and as you speak and as you reverberate your decisions and things like that. Okay. Of course, it's emotional intelligence too.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is a big one because it shapes how do you assess and read the room. It assesses how do you frame your message. I think when I look at my career and I see the people who I feel like really demonstrated phenomenal executive presence, they weren't the people who were walking in with swagger and a loud, demanding voice and dominating the conversation. They were the people who listened the most. And when they spoke, it was with intention and it was dead on and very purposeful. Back to your point about
Purposeful.
present, prepared, and purposeful. That's how they came in.
Exactly. And that's what you want. You want to leave with confidence. You want to inspire and leave with confidence. That doesn't mean you come in blowing a horn. If you want, okay, great, I guess, but you don't have to. And I think sometimes as women, we tend to think that we have to be louder than others or we have to do it differently. And in reality, we don't, right? We just go in, and because it isn't swagger, it isn't about bubbly, it isn't about the greatest answer. What it's about is just calm, purposeful, present, and knowing what's going to happen. And even if you don't expect it, I'm coaching a CFO right now. I don't care who you are. If you're a CFO, you do not panic. No, 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 no. You act like you knew that was going to happen, right? You go, okay. And we do that in deals too. We've been in deals together, Katie, where it's crashed and we're like, check that out. What do? You say, yeah, it crashes. We're working on it. You
You pivot.
address it. You pivot. Exactly. And so those are things that go into presence. Emotional intelligence, we can talk a lot about it. For me, it is about reading the room. It isn't so much about knowing where I am internally, but you do have to keep your own in check and know what your triggers are. But I think by this point, most of us do. So it's more around reading the room and saying, okay, am I listening more or am I talking more? Am I coaching or am I dictating?
Mhm,
Right? Am I leading with, so let's think about it this way. What does that say? And how does it erode your confidence base? So even those verbs, because again, 28% of people know it's all about communication. Are you clear? You know, I have a guy, he's you're wondering me where I get all these people to coach. He was actually a special forces gentleman, decorated military career. Now he wants to be an actor.
that's a
And I'm
big
like,
pivot.
it's a big pivot. Let's go do it. Okay, let's do it. It's interesting because we talk about clear communication. And with his background, he said to me one time, I had a commander that said, clear is kind. Now think about that for a minute. Clear is kind. It is. And on a battlefield, it's really got to be kind, right? You have to be crystal clear. So think about what you're saying, not only the decisions and the confidence that you brought into that room with presence, but let's talk about what we're saying. Don't lead with so what. Don't say things like, we think, maybe. No, have some solid, decisive statements. Keep
Mhm,
it brief, right? But those are what they mean by that 28% of communication. What does it look like when you're establishing presence?
mhm.
So,
Well, one of the mentors that I worked with, there was a point in my career where thank you to him because he really helped me fine tune my communication and learn my voice. And Two of the big principles he focused on was be very clear with your ask. Upfront, very clear. What is the ask? What's the purpose? Don't beat around
What
the
is
bush
it?
with it. And then secondly was always to really be clear as well of what you're asking for others and where does responsibility fall. What am I owning? What are you owning? Confirming we have this agreed upon plan. And I think if you look at executive presence, regardless of if it's in the boardroom, if it's in a one on one, and I'm just providing some feedback to someone, those are two really great principles to bring into how I can start to demonstrate that communication that builds executive presence.
Exactly. Exactly. Because again, when you think about things like storytelling that moves people, think about the leader that told you the story. You know the leader and you know the story.
Mhm.
I could tell you one from my days at SSM Health. It, they stick with you because those leaders stick with you because they do it well and they help you bring you along. So you can make those changes in your career and go, I think I want to be this today and tomorrow I want to be that.
With executive presence, let's talk about when maybe that doesn't feel comfortable for someone. Maybe they don't feel like they have high EQ. Maybe they don't feel like they're really the one who walks in the room and commands it. How do you really kind of talk through how they can embrace executive presence and still be authentic to who they are and embrace those values and find that balance with it?
That's very it's very interesting that you should say because some of the common derailers that I see to executive presence, and again, I keep calling it that, but for lack of a better term, what I see is people thinking out loud, right? You blurt it out, you say it, crap, I didn't mean for that to come out. Over apologizing. Women do this all the time. Lean in. Stop, 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 stop. The other thing we don't do very well is we keep talking. Like we don't accept those pregnant pauses in the room because we got to fill it in. We got to do something with it. Just be quiet. Let the bomb sit there. Whatever was said, let it sit. Let it be, right? But those are things that I see that derail presence. And when I think about how you maintain authenticity, is it starts with who you are. Do you really know yourself? Because sometimes it's very difficult for people to get into a situation and not disassociate themselves with the situation. That's dangerous, right? These are people that you work with. They are not people that determine your self worth. There's only one person that can do that. That's you. So I hear you and I hear your question. And what do I do when I get that? Is I start with almost the bad behavior. I know you're going, wow, Dawn. I'm sure there's going to be some behavioral psychologist calling me up going, wow. No, it's easier almost though to start with the bad, right? So I look at the derailers. What's stopping them from being that presence in the room, that storyteller that we remember, that leader, right? And I go from that behavior and I work backwards. And it usually comes back to, okay, what about yourself are you afraid of here?
Mm,
Right? What do you not accept in yourself? What are you concerned with? And again, it's that they don't really have their own brand down and their own non negotiables down. So when I say that, I mean things like, Katie, what is it worth walking over for you? What is it that a company could do to you that you would leave? You're like, I'm not staying for that. Do you know what those things are in your mind?
mhm.
Okay. That's where it starts because a lot of people don't. And then they get fearful and they get caught in this vortex of, well, if I don't do this and if I'm not this person, then I'm not going to keep my job. My personal moral compass is worth getting fired over. My personal moral compass is worth me walking over. They don't have to fire me. I'll just quit. You know, I mean, I don't like where you're going, so I can make those decisions. But that's that step. It's really the authentic nature of your soul coming through, right? And it's consistent. So if you get yourself in a position where you're like, why do I always do that? At least applaud yourself for being consistent.
And being
Okay.
aware of
And
seeing
being,
that
oh,
situation and that repeated experience.
yes, yes, because that's where it starts. And then you have to fix those things. And what I normally tell people is get 3 words about your brand. What do you want people to know when you leave the room about you, right? As a leader, as a person, put whatever you want there. What do I want them to know about me? I want them to know that I'm going to work hard, right? I'm dedicated to it. I'm certainly, I want them to know I'm intelligent enough to be on the team, right? I'm going to work hard and I'm going to finish it. So when I think about my brand, I think about presence, energy, and closure. When
Great.
I leave, I want them to know that if I have it, you don't worry about it. And that's usually where the first stumbling block when we see inauthentic behavior, because people, they don't know their non-negotiables, and then they get caught up in distinguishing like authenticity from bluntness, okay? Or even separating their identity from the outcome. Because trust me, getting fired is not the worst thing that could happen to you in the world. In fact, it might be the best thing. You just don't know it right now.
Uh-huh.
So when I think about maintaining that, I go back to who I am and my values. And then if I navigate the situation through that with that moral compass, then I start to say, okay, being authentic doesn't mean being blunt. It doesn't mean being unkind. It just means being truthful. Truthful.
That's really
There's a
powerful.
way to say it. I wrote a dissertation on servant leadership, and I remember a quote from, of all people, Mother Teresa. And she said, "Tell me the truth, but tell me the truth with as much compassion as you can muster." Okay. And I thought to myself, that's really smart. Right. But think about that, because do we really tell ourselves the truth?
Well, whenever I'm working with people on brand, I think it's a great internal reflection exercise. It's a great place to start as you're kind of figuring out and building towards presence, especially if you're earlier in your career and you feel like I'm not an executive. Executive present doesn't apply to me yet. But I always ask them to get feedback on it. With the people that they work with. And I say, think of it as if you were in the elevator and Scott says, "Hey, have you met Katie?" What would he say about you? That's what you want your brand to be. And then as you build your
Right.
executive presence, it's your brand coming through in that authentic way where other people see that without someone having to say it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Because again, if you get caught up in a place where, and I have been there, I'm not going to lie, I've been there. My self-worth was tied to my professional identity.
That was a hard lesson I had
It's
to go through as well.
it, yeah, it's a hard lesson, because you wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute,
I'm not just that.
I'm not just that.
Mhm.
Let that sink in for a hot second. And then you go, okay, what am I going to be? Right. And that's when, and I coach people this too. Even if you can't figure out what you want to be, just start to notice what you don't. Start when you see yourself, what I call shape shifting.
Mm.
You see yourself agreeing when you don't really agree. You see yourself commenting when you're like, I don't really think I have an opinion on that, but I'm jumping in there. Why am I jumping in? These are behaviors that are starting to manifest because, again, you are trying to figure out where you are and where your identity is in this situation. So even if you can't separate yourself right away, at least start to look at what isn't positive that you're doing, that you're like, I don't agree with that.
Mhm.
Why did I say that? Right? Well, you said it because you're kind of following along the whole group think, whatever you want to put with it, right? You're going along with the crowd, shape shifting. You're putting yourself in a position that isn't really who you are. And then that position will become part of your reputation.
Well, as you identify who you are, you start to see where the environments that you work, if there's congruency or not. And that helps you not only find what to do, but where that you can be doing that best at and thriving.
Exactly. Exactly. And you said it best. Get some feedback. People that don't accept feedback, there's something wrong. Okay. I mean, I know it isn't always great. I know I had to get used to it. I didn't like it either, right? I mean, nobody wants to hear, "Oh, well, you did a great job. That's great, but let's look at what you could do better," right? Well, that health system, remember the sleepy health system, and I shouldn't call it that because it's not sleepy. They're huge. What's interesting is they taught me that. They were the first health system to win the National Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award. And they did it through repetition of constantly looking at what could be better, constantly. And I got ingrained in that. And so feedback is so powerful that you talk about in these moments when you're trying to determine who you're going to be if you're not in the business world long enough, right? And you just don't have that experience yet. Or if you are too close and now you're trying to separate yourself, always remember that you can be better. And feedback is the way you do it. Trust people enough. Don't sit back and go, they're not talking about me. No, they're talking about you. Okay. Listen, let them help you because you know how hard it is to give real feedback as a leader. Yeah. Okay. So imagine them not even wanting to be open to receive that. What I tell my people is triangulate it. Okay. This person doesn't like me. That's what they said about me. That's why they said that feedback about me. You've heard that, right? This person doesn't like me. Okay. Well, go get somebody in there that does like you and have them evaluate your performance or what you're doing, right? Because none of us get better anywhere without practice. Period. I don't care what you're doing. Golf, piano, leadership, I don't care. You have to practice. Selling software, we have to practice. We practice those deals all day long. We get in there, we really see how this is going to go. We are a well tuned team.
So for, you talked about for an individual, triangulate the feedback, ask a different perspectives, bring it together, hear the commonalities. How about feedback for a leader in giving feedback? Because that can be an uncomfortable thing. You are very wise to say clarity is kind. What are some of the ways that you suggest a leader can? For me, I would always start with that. How do you feel like that went? And start to just ask questions because I say people can't argue with their own conclusions. So let's start to just put this out with starting without accusations and see where we go. But what are some of the tools, especially as a coach, that you give leaders for how they can
I
provide
love you,
feedback?
Katie. You're so sweet. She's like, I mean, sometimes, yeah, their perception is their reality, Katie. Yeah. If they think they did good, they did good, right? No, absolutely. You start with, how do you think that went? You know, and if they're like, well, it went great, and you're like, okay, well, think about your words like this. And this is the other thing I tell executives too. It's okay to walk back something. Man, we are in a world today where you ain't walking back nothing. Okay. When back in the day you could get away with a lot before social media. You're not getting away with anything today. Right? But it is okay to walk it back. It's okay to change your mind. And as a leader, it is absolutely okay to say, I don't know. But I do know somebody that does. You don't want to, again, now we're back to not instilling confidence, right? We want to instill confidence. But yes, ask them, how do you think that went? The second thing is, are you really looking at yourself with an honest lens?
That's a great question.
Ask them that. Are you sure you're being as honest as you can with yourself? Because especially when they're where they are as a leader, you're not going to bring them down. The only way you're going to get them down off that perch or wherever they are in their mind is if they get themselves down. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
So you have to actually say things like, well, I maybe saw it this way. Here's kind of what I saw. You may want to look at it a little bit differently like this. The other thing I do, get again, ask them how it went. The second thing is, are you sure you're being honest enough? The third thing I say is, if you watched your child do that or your spouse, somebody that they really care about, what would you say?
Yeah. Remove yourself from it one step.
Remove yourself from it, but not enough that they're far away from it that it doesn't hurt, right? So your child, your spouse, your significant other, whatever, that person, if you watch that person in that behavior, would you have said the same thing? So now you're getting them to separate, but again, you're getting them to back off from their own opinion of themselves because that's usually where I see most people get caught up in that. And again, some of it is just repeated behavior that they can't separate themselves from it, and it just all goes down together. But what we really want to do is keep the individual whole, right? And pull them out of that situation and get them to see that it's their behavior. It's not them.
Mhm.
When we coach, it's always, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. It's your behavior. It's not you,
Mhm.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, I happen to know Katie and I love Katie, but a lot of people that we work with, they don't know you, right? So get them to just focus on the behavior.
Yeah.
So always stay focused on the behavior. not the person.
Well, I will say across my career, you never want to hear bad feedback. It's always like, ugh, but it's the best places for growth. If someone didn't tell me those things, I would still be doing those things. And I would have hurt myself in the potential of what I can do. So, to your point earlier, it is kind.
It clear is kind.
Mhm.
And it really is. Surround yourself. I had somebody gave me this piece of advice. Get a personal board of directors. If you don't already have one, get one. I'm not talking 12 people, I'm talking three or four that you really trust that you can go back to and say, this is what I heard. Do you see me engaging in that behavior?
Mhm.
Right. So even if you don't want to listen to this section out here and that they don't know you and you are too close to it and you think, take it back to people that do know you. That's why I'm saying bring in one of your friends. I'm not averse to it. The behavior will be the behavior.
Mhm.
But you're right. Somebody saved me too, Katie.
So let's talk about sticky situations. One of the things I've really respected when I work with you is you have clarity of who you are, and that shows up in how you navigate work, especially sticky situations, which happen regardless of what our role is. We'll put in something, we feel that gut uncomfortability. Can you talk a little bit about navigating those difficult situations and how that authenticity and clarity of who you are helps you in doing those navigations of what do I do here?
So, and again, for me, if you're comfortable, if sailing along, you're not working hard enough, right? You're not pushing yourself hard enough. It's kind of like when you're working out and you can sing to your cardio, you're not working hard enough. I feel like discomfort is a good thing, especially in these sticky situations. It tells me that I'm real and I'm feeling this, right? People can tell you what to do all day long. Bosses, leaders, you got it, but they can't tell you how to feel about it. And so I am very in tune to how I feel and how people make me feel. And when I consider sticky situations and navigating them, I appreciate your compliments because humor can take a lot of the pressure away. But what you really have to do is almost embrace the pressure. It's like I said before, you want to be uncomfortable for growth to occur. That's just the way it goes. And when I think about sticky situations and people being fearful, it really comes down to, again, their self-worth is attached to whatever is happening here. And what we have to do is get them to step back, right? And realize what it is happening here. But it's a little bit harder in the moment
Mhm.
than it is 2020, right? But for me, I remember distinctly a deal that you and I worked on, and it was not an easy deal. And we had a lot of issues with it. And it really came down to, okay, are we going to go forward as an organization with that mindset, or are we going to go forward as a team?
Mm.
And we had that part in the wood, if you know what I mean,
Mhm.
right? And so for me, I saw myself laughing more, shrinking away, shape shifting, saying things that I wouldn't with the group, when in reality, I needed to be on the part of the organization and the team. And so it was really for me to have to be very careful about what I said in truth about the group, because the group wanted something different than what the organizational outcome was. And so for me, I had to switch to go to the groups, away from the group and to the organization, because the organization was saying this software really isn't what this company we're trying to sell it to really doesn't need.
I
The
remember this
team,
opportunity.
yep, the team wanted to make the goal. Team wanted to make the goal.
Uh-huh.
And we've all been in those situations. But what it comes down to is, again, who am I on this team? What am I doing? Am I present? Am I purposeful? Am I bringing my best game? And when I realized what I was doing, it was like, let me take a step back here and focus on what the customer needs, the vulnerability of the customer. Okay.
Mhm.
And where are my values in this and what I believe in? And the right thing to do is not make them spend money that they don't need to spend.
Yeah.
And if you remember, that's what we did. We backed out and we said, you know what? You really don't need this. Take your money and do something else with it.
Can
And what do you think they did? They turned around and bought everything else from us, right?
Well, it became a moment of rebuilding trust and
Exactly.
pivoting. But can you talk a little bit about being the voice that stands up and says, I know we just really want to close this deal, but here's why. I'm going to say, I don't feel good about this. And this isn't authentic to who I am. And here's what different could look like.
And now we're back to reading the room. And now we're back to very carefully choosing our words of truth. Presence is not blunt, right?
Hmm.
Presence is about instilling confidence, clarity. It isn't about swagger, right? So think about your words that you choose in these moments. Say things like, hang on, can we just take a step back here and look at what this organization is trying to do? It's almost like take a step back and elevate back up to that goal. What is the goal? What are we trying to do here? Okay. From there, we started asking those tough questions of, okay, if we don't sell this software, what is it going to do? Is it really going to take us off target? Or, you know, so you start to, now we're at the 6, 7 thing, right? You know, we're really trying to figure out, is it going to be beneficial for this organization for us to go forward? Or is it more beneficial for us to tell them the truth? What we decided on was telling them the truth, because that's the moment we all arrived at with our own internal compasses on this team.
Hmm.
We decided, okay, if I was in their shoes, would I really want this? Do I need this? No, you don't need this piece of software to track succession. Let us show you how to get it. An Excel spreadsheet in there and some pivot tables. Okay. And that's what we did.
Well, I worked with a great sales leader and he called it long term greedy of how do you step back and look at the bigger picture of we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we try to do something not okay right now just to get something. Let's look at the bigger picture here of what can we do? What could be our reputational damage much wider than this one deal if we keep pursuing this?
Right. Right. So if I think about sticky situations, Dawn's map to surviving them, one is knowing myself, right? Two is making sure I'm distinguishing between being blunt, because Dawn can be blunt and it can come off the way I don't mean it, right? That's not a purposeful statement that I meant, right? And then now it's out there forever. I want to make sure I'm not shape shifting. I'm not tying my outcome to this personally, but I am being mindful about honest framing of my words. So when I want to bring up the truth to them and say, do we really need to talk about this with this organization? I'm saying things like, I'm not sure I'm there yet. I'm saying things like, I don't know if I can support that yet because here's what I believe,
Hmm.
or here's the assumption I'm operating off of right now. All fact, all based, but centered in a language that is inflammatory
Hmm.
and still preserving me
Yeah.
and my integrity that's coming through this.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I got to go to sleep with myself.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I do.
So let's close here and talk about some of your advice to people kind of at different points in their career, especially, in someone who is passionate about mentoring early talent. You coach executives and senior leaders. If we start with just that early talent in my career, what's some of the advice that you might share to them as they start to form their path, find out who they are at work, and show up in some of these different situations we've talked about today?
Well, that's a very good question, because again, I coach a lot. I coach everybody from 20 to 70. And I can tell you that I'm constantly saying authenticity isn't about being fearless. It isn't about swagger. It's about, and here's the message that I teach them, it is about being honest despite the fear. It's embracing that fear and still being honest. That will carry you your entire career, right? Just know that internal compass going in, because that's what's so hard to hone, especially if you do have somebody that's coming into the workplace and they haven't had the same experiences that you and I have. Maybe they learned it in college, maybe they didn't even go to college. There's all kinds out there. And so for me, it starts with building that foundation that's inside of them and getting them to understand that it's about honesty despite the fear, right? Let's
Hmm.
just embrace it. Don't be reckless. Let's just learn from it. So that's the first thing I try to tell them. The second thing I always try to say is, don't keep score. If you're keeping score in your career, you're going to lose. Okay. Think about it more like this. Think about it like stronger every day. Think about it like the gym. Don't think about it. Nobody goes into the gym and says, by God, I don't ever have to go there again. No, we don't. We all have to, all through life. And so, what I try to tell people is don't keep score in your career. You're going to have wins and you're going to have losses, and you're going to have more in one day than the other. And then there are days that you're going to go home and go, what did I even do today? Why am I even here? And then I tell them in those moments, call your board of directors, call the people that you trust the most, because they will remind you of what you're capable of. Okay. As a coach, that's what I tell them. Call me. I'll remind you. You know, you asked me what I want to be known for. I want to be known to be a reminder. There's a famous rock song out there, and the line goes like this: Oz never gave anything to the Tin Man that he didn't already have. That's what I want to be in my career. I want to be a reminder. I want to remind you of the power that's within.
Mhm.
Whether if you're 20 and you're starting your career and you're growing that base, or you're 70 and you're saying, is it time for me to punch out? I want to be that voice that reminds you of exactly what you are capable of,
Mhm.
because that's all I really do. I just listen and I tell you what you tell me.
So, last advice, what do you suggest for leaders, whether they're helping coach somebody through, sticky situations, helping them, maybe provide some of that uncomfortable feedback. Any advice for leaders as we close?
Be yourself, be your best self. I know that's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's very, very hard for some leaders. I'm a extroverted individual. It's a really easy thing for me to manufacture energy, and I think everybody should be this way. But not all leaders are cut this way. And I've seen some very powerful transformational leaders, and they're great at what they do. They just don't all look the same, and they're still great at what they do. I could say some pretty provocative things like, if you just measure Hitler on his ability to lead and achieve a goal, he came pretty damn close. Okay. Dangerously close. So there are leaders out there that are leading and being very effective, but they just don't look like you and me or anybody else that we're used to. So what I say to leaders is be your best self, be your best self, but you can't hide who you are. So if you're not that gregarious, outgoing individual, don't
Mhm.
try to be.
Yeah.
Just take little steps every day to get better at it, to open up yourself just a little bit more. And that's what I mean by developing and working with that fear. I have a leader right now that's terrified of people finding out that she really gets nervous in situations even now. And I'm like, I think that's the best thing you could tell them. She's like, why? I'm like, because it shows who you really are.
It's vulnerability.
You've created this world that people are functioning in under your leadership, and they think it's great, and in reality you're the one going home every night just like itching because it's not who you are. So I tell them, be yourself, but be your best self. And if you're in a world where you need to be looking a little bit different, or leaders at this organization, maybe you're doing it this way, reach out and get some help.
Mhm.
Ask people, friends, colleagues, whatever. LinkedIn, there's a lot of people out there that are really good and have great things. If you don't want a hands-on coach, read a book. There's a
Mhm.
lot out there. There's Claude. I love my Claude these days. Just find somebody, something that's going to give you the feedback you need to get better in the world you're living in.
Mhm.
But if I were to tell you, and it's what I tell all my leaders, be yourself, but be your best self.
Mhm. Well, and for me, becoming a leader didn't mean I became a different person. I exercised different skills and I had to, lift different muscles, but it just became an evolution of who I already had clarity on who I was.
Bam. Strong base makes a strong soup.
Yep. Well, and as you left us with, be prepared, be purposeful, and be present. So thank you so much for the time, Dawn, today. I appreciate it.
Oh, Katie, this has been so wonderful. Thank you for having me.